Hello, welcome back, Croeso. Quick one now on Iolo Morgannwg. It's like the elephant in the room, because I want to do more about the bards and the triads and all that kind of stuff from our ancient British history. But of course, you immediately hit this obstacle whereby loads of people go, oh, Iolo's a forger, he's a whatever, right, okay? So I thought it'd be interesting, as I am working on the reissue of King Arthur Conspiracy, Wilson and Blackett, which will be available for reorder soon, or pre-order. There's an interesting passage where you get to see what Wilson and Blackett say about Yolo, which I thought would be worth sharing. I certainly find it interesting. So here we go, reading from the book. It's chapter 2, I think. So, what about Edward Williams, Iolo Morgannwg, now posthumously the great alleged forger? Well, he began life as a stonemason and soon became a building contractor and was often employed repairing the ancient tottering churches in his native South Wales. He developed an interest in the national history and began to persuade the clergymen and the gentry whose manors and mansions he repaired to allow him to copy their old crumbling manuscripts. He developed contacts with educated men and literati, and he became a leading figure in the Cymric literary circles of his day. Yolo was a founding member of Unitarian churches, believing in one God and nothing else, no trinities, and this would not endear him to those in authority. He backed the campaign to elect the first non-noble gentleman to Parliament from Glamorgan, and he probably favoured and supported the American War of Independence. He founded a small library, he owned a bookshop, and he owned shares in a ship. He was one of the group that organised the funding of John Evans' epic journey to America to map the upper Missouri River in 1792-5 in the search for Welsh Indians descended from Prince Madoc and his followers. In addition, Iolo refounded Eisteddfods in Wales, and he founded the annual Welsh National Eisteddfod. He was also with Dr. Owen Jones and Dr. William Owen Pugh, very important names. I'll say them again. Dr. Owen Jones and Dr. William Owen Pugh, responsible for the publication of the massive Myvyrian Archaeology of Wales in 1800, republished in 1804 and 1806. A lot of people mistakenly say that book was a forgery by Yolo. We're actually two very learned, respectable academics. Actually, most of it. Anyway, get back to the book. This vast tome contains several hundred ancient epic Cymric poems, a number of Cymric histories, the triads, historical, religious and philosophical, the Cymric laws and ancient music, and so on. He was also responsible for the public excavation and discovery of important ancient inscribed stones. He's working hard for Welsh history, Now, Griffith J. Williams was very reluctant to attack the Oxford University educated Dr. Owen Jones and Dr. William O. Pugh in his witch hunt, and so he selected Iolo, or Edward Williams, because he had not been to an English university. He alleged that some 1/3 of the Myvyrian archaeology was forged, and that one third was the section for which Iolo was responsible. Recent research shows that Dr. Pugh and Dr. Jones were in fact responsible for this section and not Iolo. So even that's not right. He then alleged that Iolo was a secret drug addict, something that none of his contemporaries had noticed. 2 television programmes in the early 1990s made by HTV, that's the Welsh TV channel, government channel, entitled Not Bad for a Junkie and Some Junkie, called upon modern knowledge of drugs, their effects on character and health, visible effects and so on, and of course the fact that Iolo died aged 79. And the fact that Iolo died aged 79, pretty good age for those days, finally exploded this lie. Iolo did have a chronic chest problem, and he did take laudanum for it, which does contain some cocaine. Alan Wilson's grandmother had a similar problem and took considerable quantities of Dr. Collis Brown's cough mixture, containing laudanum for many years, and died aged 87, perfectly sane. Griffith John Williams stated and actually wrote to the effect that, and this is a quote from what G.J. Williams wrote, "Whilst all the members of his household, his family and servants, and all his neighbours were fast asleep, Yolo sat up till 3 in the morning forging documents by lamplight." Now, amazing as it may appear, no one asked how it was that, if none of Yolo's family, his servants or neighbours, knew that he was busy forging in the dead of night in 1800, then how did Griffith John Williams from 150 miles away in North Wales know this 150 years later? Good question. For years, every inquiry into South East Wales history made by Alan Wilson was met with a childish chant of, "Iolo Morgannwg was a forger." Yes, still getting it now, Alan, yes. People who had never ever read a single word of the histories, who actually did not even know the name of the ridiculous publicity hunter, Griffith John Williams, repeated this parrot-like refrain. No one even questioned the matter. Not until a few years after Wilson and Blackett published their 4th book in 1986 did a young lady set out to begin search for a book on Yolo the Forger, presumably to rebut Wilson and Blackett. She gave up because she constantly found that manuscripts allegedly forged by Iolo Morgannwg around 1800 exist in earlier copies made by others around 1500 to 1700 or earlier. Other researchers who were better trained and equipped to make tracks through the archived jungles were persuaded to ignore the abuse and bile being flung at Wilson and Blackett in exactly the same personal manner as the vicious attacks on Yolo. And they also began to find much earlier copies of manuscripts alleged to be forged by Iolo Morgannwg around 1800. A search by Brian Davis for the alleged forged triads led to his finding groups of these triads in varying numbers scattered through older texts. He found over 180 of 208 alleged forged triads in earlier manuscripts. So again, a bit slower. So 180 out of 208. So that's about 90%. And he also found whole earlier allegedly forged manuscripts which were clearly a century or two before Yolo's time. Strange as it is, other researchers earlier than Yolo, and some who were contemporary with him, published the same records which he is said to have forged. As everything has been thrown out in a rush to demonstrate political correctness and to conform with the braying, asinine dictates of Griffith John Williams, it seems that these publications are now also retrospectively forgeries by association. The entire subject has now become taboo and contaminated. Yes, there's books that predate Yolo are dismissed because they contain Yolo forgeries. You really couldn't make it up. Actually, and you get back to the book, actually the resurrection of ancient British history can be done very comfortably without using the records honestly and honourably collected by Edward Williams, alias Yolo. This man walked from village to village, from manor to manor, come rain, hail or shine, in all winds and weather, from one end of Wales to the other. He kept the most meticulous records ever, noting down the roads and bridges and their condition, the inns and houses he stayed in, the menus and quality of food, whom he met, what he saw, etc., etc., etc. He was detailed in who he had and owned, what manuscript, and he posted these records of his journeys twice weekly to his sponsors. The National Library of Wales in the north is reluctant to admit that it has no less than 23,000 pages of Yolo's journals in its vaults. They allegedly hold ancient manuscripts written in ancient British Colburn. They know Yolo was no forger. On one journey through North Wales collecting and copying manuscripts, Yolo arrived in Aberystwyth with a considerable bundle. His sponsors were not rich, and they put up what cash they could, and so, short of funds, Yolo placed the package of manuscript copies on the stagecoach, paid the postage fee, and he set off to walk the 140 miles back to Cardiff. He arrived home and waited months, and nothing arrived by stagecoach. So he set off again and walked back north to Aberystwyth, where he found that the depot manager of the stagecoach company had removed his large package after he left and taken it to a local literary gentleman who had promptly hidden it. These crooks, surprised by Yolo's reappearance and his visit to the local magistrate, handed over the manuscript bundle to Yolo, who carried it back the 140 miles to South Wales. If it is any consolation to the sad shades of Yolo, then Wilson and Blackett can give an assurance that nothing has changed. In the early 1980s, Alan Wilson wrote 5 times the National Library of Wales in Aberystwyth for information, and enclosed paper and stamped address envelopes in his last 3 letters, and never got any reply. So there you go, plus de change and all that. So I'm doing a bit more from the book. It really is, you're going to love this book. So remember to subscribe and look out for the broadcast coming about when the books are ready for pre-order. So much about British history in Volume 1, and then all about the American Migrations, Volume 2. All right, so there, I look forward to the chat on this one. Till the next time, Heddwch.